Sarah Mitchell, a humble janitor, is falsely accused of theft by billionaire David Harrison's corporation. With only $200 in the bank and unable to afford a lawyer, she seems destined for prison. On trial day, when all hope seems lost, her 8-year-old daughter Emma shocks everyone by standing up in court and asking to defend her mother. What nobody expected was the little girl's impressive legal wisdom, who not only clears Sarah's name, but exposes a corruption scheme within the company. David Harrison, initially furious, becomes stunned by the child's intelligence and makes a decision that shocks everyone. He offers Emma a full scholarship. But when he sees an old photo on Sarah's broken phone, his world crumbles. Emma is the daughter he never knew he had, the result of a relationship that ended 9 years ago when Sarah discovered she was pregnant and he had already married someone else. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think about Emma's courage. Your support means everything. Now, let's dive into this incredible true story that will change how you see justice forever. The courtroom was dead silent. Everyone stared as the 8-year-old girl walked toward the judge's bench, her small shoes echoing through the vast chamber. But no one could have imagined what would happen next. The fluorescent lights of Harrison Corporate Tower cast harsh shadows across the security office as Sarah Mitchell sat trembling in a plastic chair. Her cleaning uniform still smelled of pine disinfectant, and her hands shook as she stared at the $50,000 diamond necklace lying on the table before her. The ornate piece sparkled under the cold office lighting, each diamond catching the light like tiny accusations. "We found this in your cleaning cart, Sarah," said Marcus Webb, the head of security, his voice cold and professional. He was a tall, imposing man in his 50s who had worked for the Harrison family for over a decade. "Care to explain how Victoria Harrison's personal jewelry ended up in your possession?" Sarah's brown eyes filled with tears. At 32, she had worked as a night janitor for Harrison Industries for 3 years, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans to support her 8-year-old daughter Emma. She had never taken so much as a paperclip that didn't belong to her. Her mother had raised her to believe that integrity was worth more than gold, and she had passed that same value to Emma. I don't understand," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible above the humming of the office equipment. "I've never seen that necklace before in my life. I would never. I have a daughter. I would never steal anything. My Emma looks up to me. I could never do something like this." Marcus exchanged a glance with his assistant, a younger man named Tony, who seemed uncomfortable with the proceedings. "The security cameras show you entering Mrs. Harrison's office at 11:47 p.m. last Tuesday. You were alone in there for 12 minutes. The necklace went missing that same night, and here we are on Wednesday morning finding it in your cart." Sarah's mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible situation. She remembered that night clearly. She had been cleaning Victoria Harrison's spacious office on the 40th floor, just as she did every Tuesday and Friday for the past 3 years. The office was like a museum, filled with expensive artwork, crystal sculptures, and jewelry displays that she always admired from afar but never dared to touch. "I was just cleaning," Sarah said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I emptied the trash, vacuumed the carpet, wiped down the surfaces, and cleaned the windows. That's all I did. I swear on my daughter's life, I never touched any personal items. I never even look at them directly because I know they're not for someone like me." The security office door opened with a soft click, and David Harrison himself walked in. At 41, he was one of the youngest billionaires in America, his sharp blue eyes and perfectly tailored navy suit commanding immediate respect. His presence filled the room like electricity. Sarah had seen him only twice before in her 3 years of employment, once during a company meeting where he spoke about quarterly profits, And once in the elevator, when she had pressed herself against the wall to make room for him and his entourage. "Mr. Harrison," Marcus stood up immediately, his posture becoming even more rigid. "We've recovered the stolen item. The suspect is denying involvement, but the evidence is quite substantial." David's gaze fell on Sarah, studying her with the same intensity he used to analyze multi-million-dollar business deals. His eyes seemed to penetrate right through her, reading her character like a balance sheet. "Sarah Mitchell, correct? You've been with us for 3 years. Personnel file shows perfect attendance, no disciplinary actions, excellent reviews from your supervisors." "Yes, sir," Sarah managed to say, her voice breaking slightly. "I've never caused any problems. I've never been late. Never missed a day unless my daughter was sick with a fever. I would never steal from you or your family. This job is everything to me and Emma. It's how we survive." David picked up the necklace, examining it carefully. The piece was clearly antique, with an intricate setting that spoke of old money and family heritage. "This piece is worth more than you make in 2 years, Ms. Mitchell. It belonged to my late mother, passed down through 3 generations. My wife treasures it deeply because it's one of the few connections she has to my family's history." Sarah felt her world collapsing around her like a house of cards. "Mr. Harrison, please, I have a little girl. She's only 8 years old, and she's the smartest, most wonderful child you could ever meet. I'm all she has in this world. I would never jeopardize our future for anything, no matter how valuable. Please, you have to believe me. I've worked so hard to build a stable life for us." "The evidence seems quite clear," David said, his tone remaining businesslike despite the emotion in Sarah's plea. "Security footage, placing you in the office, the item found in your possession, and you had exclusive access during the time frame when it disappeared. We'll be pressing charges to the fullest extent of the law. You'll need to contact a lawyer immediately." As Sarah was escorted from the building by security, her mind was consumed by one terrifying thought. With only $200 in her bank account and Emma's school expenses due next week, how could she possibly afford legal representation? And what would happen to Emma if she went to prison? The little girl who depended on her for everything would be left completely alone in a world that had just proven how cruel it could be. 3 blocks away, in their small 1-bedroom apartment above Mrs. Chen's bakery, 8-year-old Emma Mitchell sat at the kitchen table doing her homework with the dedication of a scholar. She was small for her age, with her mother's expressive brown eyes and an intelligence that consistently amazed her teachers and sometimes worried them with its intensity. When she heard her mother's key in the lock at 6 a.m., much earlier than usual, she looked up with a bright smile that could light up the darkest room. "Mommy, you're home early today. Did you finish cleaning all the offices super fast?" But the smile faded instantly when she saw her mother's tear-stained face and the way Sarah's hands trembled as she hung up her cleaning uniform for what she feared might be the very last time. The legal aid office on 5th Street smelled of old coffee, broken dreams, and the desperation of people who had nowhere else to turn. Sarah sat across from Jennifer Torres, a harried public defender with graying hair and at least 20 other cases piled precariously on her desk. The office was cramped and understaffed, with flickering fluorescent lights and a coffee machine that hadn't worked in months. Emma sat quietly beside her mother, coloring in a notebook, while listening to every word, with the intense concentration that her teachers had noticed since kindergarten. She had insisted on coming along, sensing that her mother needed moral support, even if she couldn't fully understand the gravity of the situation. "Ms. Mitchell, I'll be completely honest with you," Jennifer said, barely looking up from Sarah's case file as she flipped through police reports and security documentation. "The evidence against you is substantial and, frankly, quite damning. Security footage clearly shows you in Victoria Harrison's office during the time frame when the necklace disappeared. The stolen item was found in your possession, and you had exclusive access to the area. The prosecutor is offering what I consider a generous plea deal: 18 months in minimum security prison if you admit guilt and show remorse. Sarah's stomach dropped as if she were falling from a great height. But I didn't do it. I'm completely innocent. I've never stolen anything in my entire life. My mother raised me to believe that taking what doesn't belong to you is one of the worst things a person can do. Jennifer finally looked up, her expression sympathetic but deeply pragmatic after years of working within a system that favored those with money and connections. I understand your position, and I want to believe you, but proving innocence in a case like this is extremely difficult, bordering on impossible. Mr. Harrison's legal team consists of the best attorneys money can buy. We're talking about lawyers who charge more per hour than you make in a month. They'll argue that you had clear motive: financial stress from being a single mother, access to the victim's office, and opportunity during your shift. What about the security cameras? Sarah asked desperately, grasping for any thread of hope. Surely they would show if I actually took the necklace. Wouldn't there be footage of me handling it? The cameras show you in the office for 12 minutes, but unfortunately, the angle doesn't capture the jewelry display clearly enough to see specific actions. It's circumstantial evidence, but when combined with the necklace being found in your cart and your financial situation, Jennifer shrugged helplessly. Having seen too many similar cases end badly for the defendant. Emma looked up from her coloring, her young face serious beyond her years. Mommy didn't take anything, she said quietly but firmly. She always tells me that taking things that aren't ours is wrong, even when we don't have money for groceries or when the electricity gets turned off. She says our integrity is worth more than anything we could ever buy. Sarah's heart broke at her daughter's words, remembering the many nights they had eaten peanut butter sandwiches by candlelight, not because it was romantic, but because they couldn't afford to pay the utility bill. There had indeed been weeks when they survived on hope and the kindness of their neighbor Mrs. Chen, who sometimes left day-old pastries outside their door. I need to prepare for trial, Sarah said firmly, her voice gaining strength from her daughter's unwavering faith in her. I won't admit to something I didn't do. I won't teach my daughter that sometimes it's okay to lie just to make things easier. Jennifer sighed deeply, recognizing the stubborn determination in Sarah's eyes that she had seen in many clients who insisted on fighting uphill battles. Ms. Mitchell, I have to be brutally frank with you. I can give you maybe 3 hours of preparation time total. I have 19 other active cases right now. Harrison's team will have spent hundreds of hours preparing their case, conducting depositions, hiring expert witnesses, and building what they believe is an airtight prosecution. They'll have private investigators, character witnesses, and resources we can't even dream of. What do you have to fight back with? Sarah looked at her daughter, who was now drawing a picture of the two of them holding hands outside their apartment building, with the sun shining brightly overhead and flowers growing from the sidewalk cracks. I have the truth, and I have Emma, who reminds me every day why I need to keep fighting. Unfortunately, the truth isn't always enough in a courtroom, Jennifer replied sadly, her voice heavy with the weight of too many lost cases and shattered dreams. Justice and legal victory are sometimes two very different things, but if you're absolutely determined to fight this, we'll do our best with the limited resources we have. The trial is set for next Monday. As they left the legal aid office, Emma took her mother's hand with the fierce protectiveness of a child who sensed her world was under threat. Mommy, why don't you just tell them you didn't do it? Why don't they believe you? Sarah knelt down to Emma's level on the busy sidewalk, looking into those wise brown eyes that sometimes seemed to hold more understanding than many adults. It's not that simple, sweetheart. Sometimes adults make things very complicated when they should be simple, but I promise you, no matter what happens, I will always tell you the truth, and I will never stop fighting for us. That weekend, Sarah spent every free moment. She wasn't working her weekend cleaning job at the local library, researching legal procedures and trying to understand how she could prove her innocence. Emma sat beside her, quietly reading children's books, but occasionally glancing at her mother's legal texts with curious eyes that absorbed more than anyone realized. Monday morning arrived grey and cold, with storm clouds gathering over the city like an omen of the battle ahead. Sarah stood before the imposing granite steps of the county courthouse, her hand trembling as she gripped Emma's small fingers. The building loomed above them like a fortress, its classical columns and stern architecture designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Emma walked beside her, wearing her best dress, a simple blue outfit they had bought at a thrift store for school pictures 6 months ago. Sarah had tried desperately to arrange childcare, calling every friend and acquaintance she could think of, but with no family in the city and no money for a professional babysitter, she had no choice but to bring Emma to court. "Remember what we talked about," Sarah whispered to her daughter as they entered the security checkpoint, their footsteps echoing in the marble lobby. "You need to sit quietly in the back. No talking, no moving around, no matter what you hear people saying about Mommy. Can you do that for me?" Emma nodded solemnly, clutching a small backpack containing her coloring books, a few crackers, and a juice box. But her young mind was working furiously, processing everything she had overheard during the weekend research sessions at the library. She had been listening more carefully than any adult realized, absorbing legal concepts and procedures with the remarkable adaptability of childhood. The courtroom was more intimidating than Sarah had imagined from watching television shows. Dark wood paneling reached toward a high ceiling, decorated with intricate moldings, and the judge's bench loomed over everything like a throne of judgment. American flags stood at attention on either side, and the morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. On one side sat Harrison's legal team, 4 attorneys in expensive suits that probably cost more than Sarah's annual salary, each with perfectly organized stacks of documents, tablets, and the latest technology. Their briefcases gleamed with leather that spoke of old money and established power. On the other side sat Jennifer Torres, looking overwhelmed and underprepared, with her single briefcase held together with tape and a legal pad filled with hastily scrawled notes. David Harrison sat in the front row of the gallery, his presence commanding even in silence. His sharp blue eyes surveyed the courtroom like a general assessing a battlefield. His wife, Victoria, sat beside him, a stunning woman in her late 30s, wearing what Emma's sharp eyes estimated to be a dress worth more than her and her mother's entire wardrobe combined. Victoria's jewelry caught the morning light, each piece a small fortune displayed with casual elegance. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Watson," called the bailiff, his voice booming through the chamber. Judge Watson was a stern-looking woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a precise bun and piercing grey eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She had been on the bench for 25 years and had seen every type of case imaginable, from petty theft to murder. Her reputation for fairness was matched only by her intolerance for nonsense. "We are here today for the case of the state versus Sarah Mitchell," Judge Watson announced, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "The defendant is charged with grand theft in the first degree, a felony carrying a potential sentence of up to 5 years in prison. How does the defendant plead?" Sarah stood on shaking legs, feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom upon her. "Not guilty, Your Honor." The prosecutor, a sharp-featured man named Robert Steinberg, with silver hair and a reputation for never losing a case, rose for his opening statement. He wore confidence like expensive cologne, filling the room with his presence as he addressed the jury. For the next 25 minutes, he painted a devastating picture of Sarah as a desperate woman driven to crime by crushing financial pressure. He presented the security footage on large screens, showing Sarah entering and leaving Victoria Harrison's office. He detailed her financial struggles, her daughter's needs, and the overwhelming temptation that $50,000 would represent to someone in her desperate situation. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Steinberg concluded, his voice rising with dramatic effect, "this is not a complex case requiring elaborate theories or sophisticated analysis. The defendant had access to the victim's office, she had opportunity during her shift when no one else was present, and she had clear motive, crushing debt and a child to support. The evidence is clear, compelling, and overwhelming. Sarah Mitchell is guilty of stealing a precious family heirloom worth $50,000. Jennifer Torres stood for the defense's opening statement, but even Emma could sense her lack of confidence and preparation. The public defender spoke about reasonable doubt and the presumption of innocence. But her words seemed to fall flat in the cavernous courtroom, lacking the polish and conviction of the prosecution's presentation. As the morning proceeded, the prosecution called witness after witness, building their case like a fortress of evidence. Marcus Webb testified about finding the necklace in Sarah's cart, describing the discovery with the precision of a military operation. The security guard who reviewed the footage testified about Sarah's presence in Victoria Harrison's office during the critical time frame. Each piece of testimony seemed to tighten the noose around Sarah's neck, creating a web of circumstantial evidence that appeared unbreakable. During the lunch recess, Sarah and Emma sat alone in the courthouse cafeteria, surrounded by the quiet conversations of lawyers and court personnel. Sarah could barely eat, her stomach churning with anxiety and the growing certainty that she was fighting a losing battle. "Mommy," Emma said quietly, her voice cutting through Sarah's dark thoughts. "The man in the suit is lying." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, surprised by the certainty in her daughter's voice. Emma's young face was serious beyond her years, her brown eyes reflecting an intelligence that sometimes startled adults. "When he was talking about the cameras, he said they showed you taking the necklace. But earlier he said the cameras couldn't see the jewelry place clearly. He changed his story, and grown-ups always tell us that changing your story means you're not telling the truth." Sarah looked at her daughter in amazement. Emma had been listening more carefully than any of the adults in the room, catching an inconsistency that everyone else had missed. "You're very smart, baby, but adults sometimes say things in confusing ways that don't mean they're lying." "It's not confusing," Emma said with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "He's not telling the truth. And if he's not telling the truth about that, maybe he's not telling the truth about other things. Maybe someone else put that necklace in your cart after you finished cleaning." The afternoon session brought the prosecution's star witness, Victoria Harrison herself. She entered the courtroom like royalty, making a grand entrance. Dressed in an elegant black suit with pearls that probably cost more than Sarah's annual salary. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, and her makeup was flawless, despite the emotional nature of her testimony. "Mrs. Harrison," Prosecutor Steinberg began, his voice taking on a respectful tone reserved for wealthy clients. "Please tell the court about the necklace in question and its significance to your family." Victoria's voice was smooth and cultured, with the refined accent of private schools and finishing classes. "It was my late mother-in-law's necklace, a family heirloom passed down through 3 generations of Harrison women. Beyond its monetary value of approximately $50,000, it has tremendous sentimental value to our family. I kept it in a secure display case in my office, where I could see it while I worked and feel connected to the family history." "And when did you discover it was missing?" Wednesday morning when I arrived at the office. I have a morning routine where I check my personal items before beginning work, and I immediately noticed the case was empty. I was absolutely devastated. Victoria dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though Emma noticed from her seat in the back that the woman's eyes remained completely dry beneath her perfectly applied mascara. "Had you given anyone permission to handle or move this necklace?" "Absolutely not. Only my husband and I had the combination to that case. The cleaning staff was specifically instructed never to touch any personal items in my office. There are clear signs posted, and it's part of their training." "Ah! Can you describe your emotional state when you discovered the theft?" Victoria's voice trembled slightly, a performance worthy of Broadway. "I felt violated, betrayed. This wasn't just about money. It was about family history, about connection to David's mother, whom I never had the chance to meet. It felt like someone had stolen a piece of our family's soul." Jennifer Torres rose for cross-examination, but her questions were weak and ineffective, lacking the preparation and resources needed to challenge such a polished witness. She asked basic questions about office security and who else might have had access. But Victoria's answers were smooth and seemingly unshakable. Emma watched intently as the elegant woman testified, her young mind picking up details that the adults missed entirely. She noticed how Victoria's hand moved to cover her mouth when she spoke about the necklace's sentimental value. A gesture her second-grade teacher had taught them meant someone might not be telling the complete truth. She observed how the woman's eyes darted briefly toward her husband when she claimed only she and David had access to the case, as if seeking approval for her statement. Most tellingly, Emma saw something that chilled her to the bone. When Victoria described feeling violated and betrayed, there was no genuine emotion in her eyes. Instead, there was something cold and calculating, like a chess player moving pieces on a board. As Victoria stepped down from the witness stand, she walked past Sarah's table with the graceful stride of someone accustomed to being watched and admired. For just a moment, her carefully composed mask slipped, and Emma saw something that made her blood run cold. A small, satisfied smile that appeared and disappeared in an instant. Like a predator that had successfully cornered its prey, the prosecution rested their case with confidence, having presented what appeared to be an airtight argument. Jennifer Torres called her only witness, Sarah herself. Sarah's testimony was heartfelt but simple, lacking the polish and preparation of the prosecution's presentation. She denied taking the necklace with genuine emotion, spoke about her dedication to her job and her daughter, and pleaded for the jury to believe in her innocence. But without evidence to support her claims, her words seemed to hang in the air without weight, like prayers spoken into an empty cathedral. During cross-examination, Steinberg was relentless and brutal. He questioned Sarah about her financial situation with the precision of a surgeon, exposing every struggle and hardship she had faced as a single mother. "Ms. Mitchell," Steinberg said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass, "isn't it true that your electricity was shut off last month for non-payment?" Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment and shame. "Yes, but I paid it as soon as I could. I never let Emma go without—" "And isn't it true that your daughter has been receiving free lunch at school because you cannot afford to provide adequate meals?" "I always make sure Emma has food," Sarah said defensively, but the damage was done. The jury could see her poverty laid bare like an open wound. $50,000 would solve all your problems, wouldn't it, Ms. Mitchell? Your daughter's future, your bills, your struggles, all gone with one small theft. "I would never—" Sarah began, but Steinberg cut her off with a dismissive wave. Emma watched her mother being attacked with words like weapons, and something fierce and protective awakened inside her 8-year-old heart. She began to understand that this wasn't just about the truth. It was about power, money, and a system that seemed designed to crush people like her mother, who couldn't fight back with expensive lawyers and political connections. As the day concluded, Judge Watson announced that closing arguments would begin the next morning, followed by jury deliberation. Sarah walked out of the courthouse feeling utterly defeated, certain that she would be spending the next several years in prison while her daughter grew up in foster care. That night, as Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling and fighting back tears, Emma pretended to sleep beside her. But the little girl's mind was racing, replaying every moment of the trial, every word spoken, every detail observed with the perfect recall that children possess. Emma had never spoken in front of strangers before. She had never raised her voice in a classroom or challenged an adult. But as she listened to her mother's quiet sobs in the darkness, she made a decision that would shock everyone in that courtroom and change their lives forever. Tomorrow, she would do something that 8-year-old girls weren't supposed to do. She would fight for her mother with the only weapons she had: her voice, her intelligence, and her unshakable belief that the truth would always win if someone was brave enough to speak it. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected complication that would change everything. Jennifer Torres called Sarah at 7 a.m. with devastating news that felt like another punch to an already battered family. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Jennifer said weakly over the phone, her voice slurred from pain medication. "I was in a car accident last night. I'm in the hospital with a severe concussion and a broken arm. The court will have to assign another public defender, but it might delay the trial by weeks or even months. And honestly, any new lawyer will need substantial time to prepare, and even then." Sarah felt her world spinning out of control, like standing in the center of a tornado. "What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my case?" "You have the legal right to represent yourself, but I strongly advise against it," Jennifer continued, her voice fading in and out. "Legal procedures are incredibly complex, and you're not trained in courtroom protocol or legal argumentation. The prosecution will eat you alive." After hanging up, Sarah sat at her tiny kitchen table with her head in her hands, feeling more alone and helpless than she had ever felt in her entire life. The weight of the situation crushed down on her like a physical force. Emma, dressed and ready for what she thought would be another day at court, watched her mother with growing concern and determination. "Mommy, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" "The lawyer can't come today, baby. She's hurt and in the hospital. I don't know what we're going to do. I might have to speak for myself, but I don't know how. I don't know the right words or the right questions to ask. I'm not smart enough for this." Emma climbed into her mother's lap, something she hadn't done in months, wrapping her small arms around Sarah's neck with fierce protectiveness. "What happens if you don't have a lawyer? I would have to speak for myself, but I don't understand legal stuff. I might say the wrong thing and make everything worse." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her young mind working with the intensity of a computer processing data. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I know some of the right words." Sarah looked at her daughter in confusion, wiping tears from her eyes. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I've been listening, Mommy, and I've been reading." Emma pulled out a library book she had hidden in her backpack. "Basic Legal Procedures for Beginners," along with Understanding Court Systems and How to Question Witnesses. Sarah stared in amazement at the stack of books. "I checked these out when you weren't looking. I wanted to help you." "Oh, sweetheart." Sarah hugged her daughter tightly, overwhelmed by love and heartbreak in equal measure. "That's so incredibly sweet of you to try, but this is grown-up stuff. Very complicated grown-up stuff that even adults with years of training struggle with." "But I understand some of it," Emma insisted, with the confidence that only children possess. "And I saw things in that courtroom, Mommy. Things that didn't make sense. Things that the other lawyer should have asked about but didn't." "What kind of things?" Emma's brown eyes became serious and focused. Like why Mrs. Harrison's story changed, like why she smiled when they talked about finding the necklace, like why the security man seemed nervous when he was talking. I notice things, Mommy. You always tell me I'm good at noticing things. An hour later, they sat in Judge Watson's chambers, a wood-paneled office filled with law books and legal documents. The judge, having been informed of the dramatic change in circumstances, looked at Sarah with a mixture of sympathy and deep concern. Ms. Mitchell, I can postpone this trial until a new attorney is assigned to your case, but given the backlog in the public defender's office, it could be several weeks or even months. During that time, you would likely remain free on bail, but the uncertainty would continue to hang over your family. Judge Watson paused, studying Sarah's face carefully. Alternatively, you can choose to represent yourself today and proceed with closing arguments. I must warn you, however, that proceeding without legal representation is extremely risky and rarely advisable. The law is complex, and courtroom procedure is unforgiving. Sarah looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly with the unwavering faith that only a child can have in their parent. Your Honor, I'd like to represent myself. Judge Watson sighed deeply, having seen too many self-represented defendants make critical errors. Very well. But I want it clearly on the record that you've been advised of the risks and that this decision is entirely voluntary. We'll reconvene in 1 hour for closing arguments. As they left the judge's chambers, Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve with urgency. Mommy, I want to help you. I really, really want to help. Baby. You can help by sitting quietly and being good. That's the best help you can give me right now. But Emma's mind was already formulating a plan that would either save her mother or get them both in serious trouble. She had noticed something crucial during Victoria Harrison's testimony, something that all the adults had missed because they were focused on the wrong details. She had seen the truth hiding in plain sight, and she knew that in just a few hours she would have to be braver than she had ever been in her entire 8 years of life. The question that terrified and excited her in equal measure was simple. Would anyone listen to a little girl when everything was on the line? Would the adults take her seriously, or would they dismiss her observations as childish imagination? Emma clutched her mother's hand tighter and made a silent promise to herself and to the memory of her grandmother, who had always told her that speaking the truth was the most important thing a person could do, no matter how scary it might be. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity as proceedings resumed, with standing room only in the gallery. Word had spread through the city's legal community about the dramatic turn of events. A single mother forced to defend herself against one of the city's most powerful families after her lawyer's hospitalization. Local news crews had gathered outside like vultures, and the gallery was filled with spectators drawn by the human drama unfolding, including several off-duty attorneys who had come to witness what many expected to be a legal massacre. Sarah stood at the defendant's table completely alone, her hands trembling as she shuffled through the few notes she had managed to prepare during the short recess. Her legal pad contained simple reminders written in her careful handwriting. Tell the truth, look at the jury, stay calm. Across from her, the prosecution team looked confident and relaxed, certain that victory was not just within their grasp, but inevitable. The contrast was stark and painful to observe. 4 expensive suits against one woman in a borrowed dress, technological resources against handwritten notes, years of legal training against desperate hope and maternal determination. Judge Watson called the court to order with her customary authority. Ms. Mitchell, you may present your closing argument to the jury. Sarah rose on unsteady legs, acutely aware that every eye in the courtroom was upon her, many filled with pity rather than expectation. Your Honor, members of the jury, I know I'm not a lawyer. I know I don't have fancy words or complicated legal theories. I'm just a mother trying to prove my innocence so I can go home to my daughter." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke from the heart, drawing strength from the knowledge that Emma was watching and believing in her. "I have worked for Harrison Industries for 3 years. I have never taken anything that didn't belong to me. Not even a pen or a paperclip. I work 2 jobs to support my daughter, and yes, sometimes we struggle financially. But I would never, ever steal from anyone, because I couldn't live with myself, and I couldn't look my daughter in the eye." She paused, looking directly at each member of the jury with genuine emotion. "The prosecution wants you to believe that I'm a desperate woman who made a terrible choice. But I'm asking you to consider this. If I had stolen that necklace, would I have been stupid enough to leave it in my cleaning cart where anyone could find it? Wouldn't I have hidden it at home immediately or sold it somewhere safe? Why would I carry evidence of my crime around in my work equipment?" It was a good point that resonated with several jurors, but Emma could see from their faces that it wasn't enough to overcome the mountain of circumstantial evidence. They looked sympathetic, but ultimately unconvinced. Like people who wanted to believe, but couldn't quite make the leap of faith required. Prosecutor Steinberg's closing argument was devastating and methodical, delivered with the precision of a master craftsman, dismantling his opponent piece by piece. He systematically reviewed every piece of evidence, painted Sarah as a woman driven to desperation by crushing poverty, and argued that her story was nothing more than the predictable denials of someone caught red-handed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he concluded with dramatic flair, his voice rising to fill every corner of the courtroom, "we all feel natural sympathy for Ms. Mitchell's difficult situation as a struggling single mother, but sympathy cannot and must not override evidence. The defendant had clear access to the victim's office. She had obvious opportunity during her shift when no security was present, and she had overwhelming motive in the form of crushing financial pressure. The evidence is not just clear, it is overwhelming and irrefutable. Justice demands that you find her guilty." Judge Watson turned to the jury with the solemnity of someone about to deliver a weighty responsibility. "Ladies and gentlemen, you will now retire to deliberate on the evidence presented and reach your verdict." "Wait!" A small but clear voice called out from the back of the courtroom, cutting through the formal proceedings like a knife through silk. Every head in the packed courtroom turned in unison to see Emma Mitchell standing up in the gallery, her 8-year-old frame looking impossibly small in the vast chamber, but her posture radiating determination and courage that seemed to fill the entire space. "Excuse me," Emma said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden, profound silence. "I have something very important to say about my mommy's case. Something that nobody has talked about yet." Judge Watson looked startled, her 25 years of experience having never prepared her for such a moment. "Young lady, children are not permitted to speak during court proceedings. Please sit down immediately." But Emma was already walking down the aisle with measured steps, her small shoes echoing in the silent courtroom like a drumbeat of destiny. "Your Honor, my mommy doesn't have a lawyer anymore because hers got hurt, and she's not trained to ask the right questions. But I noticed something that nobody else saw, something that proves she didn't take that necklace." The courtroom erupted in murmurs and whispers, but Emma continued walking forward with unwavering determination. David Harrison leaned forward in his seat, his blue eyes fixed on the little girl with intense curiosity and something else, a strange recognition that he couldn't quite place. Victoria Harrison's face had gone pale, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the fear that flashed across her features. "This is highly irregular," Judge Watson said, her voice betraying uncertainty for the first time in years. "Young lady, court proceedings have very strict rules. But Emma had reached the front of the courtroom and looked up at the judge with those intelligent brown eyes that seemed far too mature for her age. Her voice was steady and clear, cutting through the chaos with remarkable composure. "Please, Your Honor, if you don't let me speak. My mommy is going to go to jail for something she didn't do, and the real person who took the necklace is going to get away with it forever." The silence in the courtroom was deafening, filled with electricity and anticipation. Every person present sensed they were about to witness something extraordinary, a moment that would be talked about in legal circles for years to come. But nobody, not even Emma herself, could have predicted just how extraordinary and life-changing it would truly be. Judge Watson stared down at the small figure before her bench, torn between decades of legal protocol and an inexplicable intuition that this child might hold the key to justice itself. The weight of decision hung in the air like a storm about to break, while Emma stood perfectly still, waiting for adults to decide whether truth spoken by a child's voice would be allowed to ring out in a hall of justice. Judge Watson stared down at the 8-year-old girl, standing before her bench, torn between legal protocol and an inexplicable intuition that this child might hold the key to justice. The courtroom remained in stunned silence as Emma stood with perfect posture, her small hands clasped behind her back. "Your Honor," Emma said with remarkable composure, "I know children aren't supposed to talk in court, but my mommy's lawyer got hurt and can't be here. Someone needs to ask the right questions, and I think I know what they are." David Harrison found himself leaning forward, captivated by the little girl's poise. There was something familiar about her determined expression, something that stirred a memory he couldn't quite place. "This is completely unprecedented," Prosecutor Steinberg objected, rising from his seat. "A child cannot serve as legal counsel. This is absurd." Judge Watson raised her hand for silence. "Miss Mitchell, do you consent to your daughter speaking on your behalf?" Sarah looked at Emma, seeing a strength in her daughter's eyes that she had never noticed before. "Yes, Your Honor. I trust my daughter completely." "Very well," Judge Watson said, making legal history. "Emma Mitchell, you may address the court, but understand you are not a lawyer. And this is highly unusual." Emma nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Your Honor. I want to ask Mrs. Harrison some questions about her testimony yesterday." Victoria Harrison's face went ashen. "This is ridiculous. I'm not answering questions from a child." "You will answer the questions or be held in contempt," Judge Watson said firmly. "Mrs. Harrison, please retake the witness stand." As Victoria reluctantly returned to the witness stand, Emma walked closer, her small frame dwarfed by the courtroom's imposing architecture. But her voice carried with surprising authority. "Mrs. Harrison, yesterday you said that only you and your husband could open the case where the necklace was kept. Is that true?" "Yes," Victoria replied curtly. "But earlier when the security man was talking, he said the case was found open on Wednesday morning. If someone stole the necklace on Tuesday night, why would they leave the case open? Wouldn't they close it so nobody would notice the necklace was gone until later?" Victoria's eyes flickered nervously. Perhaps the thief was in a hurry." Emma tilted her head with childlike curiosity. "But my mommy cleans very carefully. She never rushes. All her supervisors say she's the most thorough cleaner they have. So if she took the necklace, wouldn't she have been careful to close the case?" Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The jury was paying attention now, seeing the logic in the child's simple questions. "Furthermore," Emma continued, her vocabulary impressive for her age, "you said the necklace has special sentimental value because it belonged to your husband's mother. But I noticed something when you were testifying yesterday." Emma paused dramatically, and every person in the courtroom held their breath. "When you talked about how much you loved the necklace, you covered your mouth with your hand. My teacher says people do that when they're not telling the truth. And when you said only you and Mr. Harrison could open the case. You looked at him instead of at the jury. That's another sign someone might be lying. Victoria's composure was cracking. This is harassment from a child who doesn't understand adult situations. But Emma wasn't finished. There's one more thing, Mrs. Harrison. Something nobody else noticed because they weren't looking at you when the security man was talking about finding the necklace in my mummy's cart. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. When he said they found the necklace, you smiled. Just for a second, but I saw it. You looked happy. Why would you be happy about my mommy getting in trouble unless... Emma's young voice trailed off meaningfully. David Harrison's eyes were now locked on his wife, seeing her in a completely different light. The pieces of a puzzle he hadn't even known existed were beginning to fall into place. Unless you put the necklace there yourself. Emma finished, her words echoing through the stunned courtroom like a thunderclap. Victoria Harrison shot to her feet. That's a lie. This child is making up stories to save her criminal mother. But Judge Watson was studying Victoria's reaction carefully. In 25 years on the bench, she had developed an instinct for truth and deception. Mrs. Harrison, please remain seated and answer the child's questions. Emma stepped closer to the witness stand, her brown eyes unwavering. Mrs. Harrison, where were you on Tuesday night between 11:30 p.m. and midnight? I was at home, of course, sleeping. Can anyone prove that? Was your husband with you? Victoria's eyes darted to David, who was staring at her with growing suspicion. He was working late in his study, but I was definitely home. Mrs. Harrison, Emma continued with the relentless logic of childhood, you have a key card to get into the building after hours, don't you? Just like your husband? Yes, but I never use it. Emma turned to address the entire courtroom. Yesterday, the security man said they checked who used key cards that night. They said only my mummy's cleaning access card was used, but they didn't check for executive key cards, did they? Prosecutor Steinberg was frantically shuffling through his papers. The security report had indeed only tracked cleaning staff access, not executive personnel. Your Honor, Emma said politely, I think someone should check if Mrs. Harrison's key card was used that night. Judge Watson looked at Marcus Webb, who was sitting in the gallery. Mr. Webb, can this information be retrieved? Marcus, clearly uncomfortable, nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I can have that data within 30 minutes. Court will recess for 30 minutes, Judge Watson announced. During the recess, Emma sat beside her mother in the hallway, swinging her legs from the adult-sized chair. Sarah stared at her daughter in amazement. Emma, how did you notice all those things? I watch people, Mummy. You taught me to pay attention to details when we read books together. You always say the most important clues are the ones everyone else misses. David Harrison approached them, his expression unreadable. Ms. Mitchell, may I speak with you privately? Sarah instinctively pulled Emma closer. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of my daughter. David knelt down to Emma's eye level. Young lady, that was remarkable detective work in there. How old are you? I'm 8, Emma replied matter-of-factly. I'll be 9 on March 15th. Something flickered in David's eyes, a quick calculation, a sudden recognition. He studied Emma's face more carefully, noting the determined set of her jaw, the intelligence in her brown eyes, and something else. Something that reminded him of looking in a mirror. March 15th, he repeated slowly. What year were you born? 2015. Emma answered, puzzled by the strange expression on the man's face. David's world tilted slightly. March 2015, 9 months after his brief relationship with Sarah had ended, 9 months after he had chosen duty and his arranged marriage over love and truth. Before he could process this revelation fully, Marcus Webb approached with a tablet in his hands and a very pale complexion. Mr. Harrison, Marcus said quietly, we need to talk. The courtroom reconvened with an electricity in the air that hadn't been there before. Marcus Webb took the witness stand with obvious reluctance, avoiding eye contact with both David and Victoria Harrison. "Mr. Webb," Judge Watson began, "were you able to retrieve the key card access data for Tuesday night?" Marcus cleared his throat nervously. "Yes, Your Honor. The data shows that Mrs. Victoria Harrison's executive key card was used to enter the building at 11:52 p.m. on Tuesday night and to exit at 12:17 a.m. Wednesday morning." The courtroom erupted. Victoria Harrison's face went from pale to ashen. "That's impossible. The system must be malfunctioning." Emma raised her small hand. "Your Honor, may I ask Mr. Webb another question?" Judge Watson, now fully invested in this unprecedented proceeding, nodded. "Go ahead, Emma." "Mr. Webb, when you found the necklace in my mommy's cart, where exactly was it?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. It was in the bottom of the cart, under some cleaning supplies. "But my mommy always empties her cart completely at the end of each shift and refills it fresh the next day. She taught me about being organized, so if someone put something in her cart on Tuesday night, it would have been found when she emptied it Tuesday night, not Wednesday morning when you found it." Marcus's face reddened. "Well, perhaps she forgot that one time." "Or," Emma said with devastating 8-year-old logic, "someone put it there Wednesday morning before you found it." David Harrison stood up slowly, his face a mask of cold fury. "Marcus, is there something you want to tell this court?" Marcus Webb crumbled under the weight of guilt and David's piercing stare. "Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Harrison approached me last week. She said she needed to get rid of someone who was becoming a problem. She said Sarah had been stealing small items, and she needed evidence to prove it." "Continue," Judge Watson commanded. "She gave me the necklace and told me to plant it in Sarah's cart. She said it would send a message to other employees about theft. I thought it was legitimate, sir. Mrs. Harrison is your wife. I thought you approved." Victoria Harrison screamed. "He's lying. He's trying to save himself." But Emma wasn't finished. "Mr. Webb, why did Mrs. Harrison want to get rid of my mommy? What made her a problem?" Marcus looked directly at David Harrison, and his next words would change everything. "Because your mother was pregnant 9 years ago, and Mrs. Harrison found out that you were asking questions about Sarah after she left. Mrs. Harrison was afraid that if Sarah ever came back into Mr. Harrison's life, it would threaten her marriage." The silence that followed was deafening. David Harrison felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. He stared at Emma, really looked at her for the first time, and saw his own determined chin, his own piercing intelligence, his own stubborn streak that had made him a billionaire before 40. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth as she realized that her secret was about to destroy the protective wall she had built around her daughter's life. Emma, however, simply looked confused. "I don't understand. What does my mommy being pregnant have to do with anything?" David Harrison's voice, when he finally spoke, was barely above a whisper. "Emma, who told you your father was?" Emma looked at her mother, then back at David. "Mommy said my daddy was a good man who couldn't be with us because he had other responsibilities. She said he didn't know about me." The truth hung in the air like a living thing. And everyone in the courtroom understood what the little girl herself was still too young to fully comprehend. David Harrison's legs nearly gave out as the full weight of the revelation hit him. This brilliant, courageous little girl who had just saved her mother from prison was his daughter, the child he never knew existed. The family he had unknowingly destroyed through his wife's jealousy and manipulation. Victoria Harrison, seeing her carefully constructed world collapsing, made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "This is all lies and manipulation. That child isn't David's. Sarah is a gold digger who—" "Enough!" David's voice thundered through the courtroom with such force that even Judge Watson looked startled. Victoria, you framed an innocent woman for a crime you committed. You tried to destroy the mother of my child, and you've stolen 9 years of my daughter's life from me." Emma looked between the adults, beginning to understand that something monumental was happening. "Mr. Harrison, are you saying you're my daddy?" David knelt down in front of Emma, his eyes filling with tears for the first time in decades. "I think I am, sweetheart. And I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you and your mommy." Sarah stood up, her voice shaking. "David, I never wanted money or anything from you. When I found out I was pregnant, you were already engaged to her. I thought it was better to raise Emma alone than to complicate your life." "You should have told me," David said, his voice breaking. "I had a right to know. Emma had a right to know." Emma, with the adaptability that children possess, walked over to David and studied his face carefully. "You have the same eyes as me," she said matter-of-factly, "and the same stubborn chin that Mommy always talks about." Despite everything, David smiled through his tears. "Is that what your mommy says?" "She says I'm too smart for my own good, just like someone else she used to know." Emma paused thoughtfully. "Are you that someone?" "I think I am." Judge Watson, who had been watching this family drama unfold with professional fascination and personal emotion, cleared her throat. "Mrs. Harrison, you are under arrest for perjury, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Mr. Webb, you are also under arrest as an accessory." As the bailiffs moved to arrest Victoria and Marcus, Victoria turned back with venom in her eyes. "You think this little reunion is going to work? He's a billionaire, Sarah. He'll take that child away from you the moment he can." Emma stepped protectively in front of her mother. "No, he won't. He's my daddy, but Mommy is my mommy. We're a family now, not a broken one." David looked at this remarkable 8-year-old who had saved her mother, exposed corruption, and somehow managed to understand complex family dynamics with stunning clarity. "Emma's right," he said, looking directly at Sarah. "I've missed 8 years of Emma's life because of lies and secrets. I don't want to miss any more because of pride or complications. Sarah, I know I have no right to ask this, but would you let me be part of Emma's life? Part of both your lives?" Sarah looked at Emma, who nodded enthusiastically. "We'd like that," Sarah said softly. "But we do this together, as a team. No one gets left behind." Emma grinned, the first genuinely childlike expression she'd worn all day. "Does this mean I don't have to worry about Mommy going to jail anymore?" Judge Watson smiled, the first time she'd smiled in court in years. "The charges against your mother are dismissed, Emma. She's free to go home with you. And," David added, "she'll never have to worry about money for groceries or electricity again. Not ever." As the family of 3 left the courthouse together, Emma skipping between her parents, the crowd of reporters and spectators watched in amazement. They had come expecting to see a poor woman sent to prison. Instead, they had witnessed a miracle of truth, justice, and love. 3 months later, the Harrison mansion had been transformed. What was once a cold, imposing showcase of wealth had become a warm home filled with Emma's laughter, Sarah's gentle presence, and David's rediscovered joy in simple pleasures. Emma's room was a little girl's dream, but she had insisted on keeping her old stuffed rabbit from the apartment, placing it prominently on her new canopy bed. "He's been with me and Mommy through everything," she explained to David. "He's family too." Sarah had initially resisted moving into the mansion, but Emma's practical 8-year-old wisdom had prevailed. "Mommy, it's silly to live in 2 different houses when we're a family. Besides, there's a library here bigger than the one downtown, and you know how much I love books." David had renovated his home office to include a small desk where Emma could do her homework while he worked. He discovered that having his daughter nearby made him more focused, not less. Her questions about his business decisions often provided insights that his MBA-educated executives missed. "Daddy," Emma said one evening as they worked side by side, "why do some of your employees look scared when they talk to you?" David looked up from his laptop. What do you mean, sweetheart? At the company picnic last week, when people came to talk to you, their voices got different, like when kids talk to the principal. David realized his daughter was teaching him about leadership in ways no business school ever could. I think I've been too serious for too long, Emma. Maybe you can help me learn how to be friendlier. I could teach you to smile more, Emma offered helpfully. Mommy says smiling makes everything better. Sarah had enrolled in night school to get her business degree, something she'd always dreamed of but never thought possible. David had offered to simply give her a position at his company, but Sarah insisted on earning her way. Emma needs to see that we achieve things through hard work and education, Sarah explained. Money can't be the solution to everything. David found himself falling in love with Sarah all over again. Not the young woman he'd known 9 years ago, but the strong, principled mother she'd become. Their relationship grew slowly, built on mutual respect and their shared love for Emma. One evening, as they tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at both her parents with a serious expression. "I have a question," she announced. "What is it, baby?" Sarah asked. "Are you and Daddy going to get married?" David and Sarah exchanged glances over their daughter's head. They had been wondering the same thing, but hadn't yet found the courage to discuss it. "What do you think about that idea?" David asked carefully. Emma considered this with her characteristic thoughtfulness. "I think it would be nice, but only if you both want to. Not just because of me. I read in a book that people should get married because they love each other, not because they have kids together." Sarah laughed softly. "You're very wise for someone who's still 8 years old." "Almost 9, Emma corrected. "And I think you do love each other. I can tell by the way you look at each other when you think I'm not watching." 3 weeks later, on Emma's 9th birthday, David had a surprise. Instead of the elaborate party he'd initially planned, they had a small gathering in their backyard with Emma's closest friends from school and a few family friends. But the biggest surprise came when David knelt down in front of both Sarah and Emma with 2 small boxes. "Sarah Mitchell," he said, his voice emotional, "you've given me the greatest gift in the world, our daughter. And Emma, you've taught me that being smart isn't just about business or money. It's about courage, truth, and standing up for the people you love." He opened the first box, revealing a simple but beautiful engagement ring. "Sarah, will you marry me? Not because we have Emma, but because I can't imagine my life without either of you in it." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "Yes, David, yes." He opened the second box, revealing a delicate necklace with a small heart pendant. "And Emma, this is a promise necklace. It's my promise that I will always be your daddy. I will always be proud of you, and I will never, ever let anyone hurt you or your mommy again." Emma threw her arms around both her parents. "This is the best birthday ever." As the 3 of them hugged in their backyard, surrounded by the laughter of children and the warmth of friendship, none of them could have imagined how much their lives had changed since that terrifying day in court 6 months ago. 1 year later, the Mitchell-Harrison family stood together in the same courthouse where their journey had begun. But this time for a joyous occasion. Judge Watson, who had presided over their case, was officiating their wedding ceremony. Emma, now 9 and serving as both flower girl and ring bearer, walked down the aisle with the confidence of someone who had already faced down injustice and won. She wore a beautiful pink dress that she had chosen herself, insisting it have pockets in case I need to carry anything important. Sarah looked radiant in an elegant but simple white dress, her face glowing with happiness. David, typically composed in business but nervous as a schoolboy today, waited at the altar with tears in his eyes. "We are gathered here today," Judge Watson began, "to witness the marriage of 2 people whose love story began with injustice, but grew into something beautiful through courage, truth, and the wisdom of a remarkable little girl." Emma beamed from her position as the world's youngest maid of honor. "David and Sarah," Judge Watson continued, "your journey to this moment has been unconventional, to say the least, but it has proven that love, truth, and family can overcome any obstacle." As they exchanged vows, David promised to be not just a husband but a true partner and father. Sarah promised to trust and build a future together. Emma, when asked if she had anything to add, stepped forward with characteristic seriousness. "I just want to say that families come in all different ways. Some people are born into families, and some people choose their families. But the best families are the ones where everyone takes care of everyone else, tells the truth, and never gives up on each other." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom after the ceremony. As they celebrated at their home with close friends and family, Emma pulled her parents aside. "I have a surprise for both of you," she announced, producing a wrapped package. Inside was a framed drawing she had made, 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house, with the words, "The Harrison Family," written in her careful 9-year-old handwriting. "I drew this the night after the trial," Emma explained. "Even before Daddy asked us to marry him, I knew we were going to be a real family. Sometimes kids just know things that adults take longer to figure out." David hung the drawing in his office, where it became his most treasured possession. 6 months later, when a national news program wanted to do a follow-up story on The Little Lawyer, Emma declined the interview. "I'm not a lawyer," she explained to her parents. "I'm just a kid who didn't want her mommy to go to jail for something she didn't do." Anyone would have done the same thing. But David and Sarah knew better. Their daughter had done something extraordinary, not just solving a crime or exposing corruption, but bringing a family together through sheer determination and an unshakable belief in truth and justice. Emma continued to excel in school, showing particular aptitude for both law and business. When teachers asked about her career plans, she would say, "I want to help people who can't help themselves, just like my mommy couldn't help herself that day in court." David established the Emma Mitchell Foundation, providing legal aid to families who couldn't afford representation. Sarah earned her business degree and became the foundation's director, using her experience to ensure that no other family would face the system alone and unprepared. And Emma, she remained a remarkable but normal little girl who loved books, asked thoughtful questions, and occasionally reminded her parents that the most important things in life, love, truth, and family, were also the simplest. On quiet evenings, when they sat together reading in their living room, David would sometimes look at his wife and daughter and marvel at how a horrible injustice had led to the greatest blessing of his life. Emma would catch him staring and ask, "What are you thinking about, Daddy?" "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," he would answer. "We're all lucky," Emma would reply with 9-year-old wisdom. "But it wasn't really luck. We made good choices, we told the truth, and we took care of each other. That's what families do." And in that simple statement lay the true moral of their story, that justice, love, and family aren't things that happen to you. They're things you create through courage, truth, and never giving up on the people you love. The little girl who had stood up in a courtroom to save her mother had taught them all that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truth, and that real strength comes not from wealth or power, but from knowing what's right and having the courage to fight for it. Their story became a legend in legal circles, but to them, it was simply the beginning of their happily ever after.